Hey, look!
G'day, Charlie.
You white bastard!
You black bastard.
Nanti ngomong jalan kiri. Mama.
Kalau kanyane Arab. Mar di ni kalau punya jeruk mati kau.
Who owns this?
Me.
You got a license?
Kakana orang ni jangko bal-bal.
Bayam ya, kami yang udul kira.
Mate, you want to be careful. Coppers are trying to stop this sort of thing.
I've done nothing wrong.
Hey, Charlie. What do you got there?
I made a spare.
It's incredible, but I'm gonna have to take it.
But you took my gun.
What do you want, Charlie?
You got a job and you got a house on my land. With my house. With my job.
Kayaknya benar mah.
Benar-benar alarm. Oh, not that good, ma. In wala jan berarti. Herwarane. Kan bahan aja.
I believe you were found in the bush, Charlie.
I born in the bush. They didn't find me in the bush. Yeah! You know, I'm good, eh? I can deal with it. Tap, 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 tap.
I have done nothing wrong. It's a catchy phrase, isn't it? That's true actually. They have done nothing wrong, except being on the land. Today I'm gonna talk about a film. The film is entitled Charlie's Country. It was directed by Rolf de Heer, a Dutch-Australian director. Here's some fact about the film. It was written by Rolf de Heer and David Gulpeville. It's a semi-autobiographical drama. The film was released on cinema on July 17, 2014 in Australia. It was produced by Rolf de Heer, Nils Eriksson Nielsen, Domenico Procacci, music by Graham Tardif, and cinematography by Ian Jones. The main roles are played by David Gulpilil, Luke Ford, and Peter DeGiger. David Gulpilil is playing the role Charlie. Charlie is the main protagonist. He's an Aboriginal man who is living in an urban Aboriginal community in modern Australia. While Luke Ford is playing Luke. Luke is a white police officer in the Aboriginal community. And the last one, Peter DeGiger, he's playing Black Pete. He's another Aboriginal man in the community. He is one of Charlie's friends. Unlike Charlie, he conforms with the enforcement of the white law. The action takes place in Arnhem Land, Northern Territory, Australia. In the map you can see the brown place. Is that the place the movie takes place? In the film there are two languages spoken by Aboriginal and Australian. First languages is English. Even the movie is predominated by English language. We can see most of the time a local language is spoken between Charlie and his friend and his community, Yognomata. Yognomata, meaning the Yogno tongue, is a linguistic family that includes the language of the Yogno. Yogno means person actually. The indigenous people of the northeast Arnhem Land in northern Australia. In the map, languages is spoken in this green area, right here. The movie nominated and awarded in many times, including with prestigious awards like Cannes Film Festival and AACT Awards. And even the film was selected for the Best Foreign Language Film at Academy Awards, others saying Oscar, but it was not nominated. It could be first time for an Australian movie was gonna nominate it if it did. While if we talk about the story is about an Aboriginal man, Charlie, who lives in Arnhem Land, paints tree barks and fishes, all the feeling out of place in Australia, which is no longer his. He laments the loss of his culture in modern Australia. After his spear and his gun are confiscated by the police, who thinks it's a weapon, he decides to leave his urban Aboriginal community and go back to the bush, his mother country. However, after this journey, he falls ill and is rushed to the hospital in Darwin. He discharges himself and then befriends an Aboriginal woman and buys alcohol illegally for other Aboriginals, and he gets arrested. As a result, he is sent to prison. When he gets out, he returns his old urban Aboriginal community, agrees to pass on traditional dances from his generation to young Aboriginal people, fearing the loss of their cultural identity. White law versus Indigenous people. In the film, we get witness how Aboriginal people get control limited and forced by white force in their own land. There's a several examples for this. The first example we can find in the movie is the intervention is the important part because this legislation is called the Northern Territory National Emergency Response, also known as the intervention. It was a package of measures enforced by legislation affecting Indigenous Australians in Northern Territory of Australia. This legislation was passed because the government said they wanted to protect Indigenous community, Aboriginal people. The measure included restriction on the consumption of alcohol and pornography. In some area, there's only was just for alcohol or just for pornography, but at some communities, including complete bans on both. No liquor, no pornography. And this intervention was brought about by the enactment of Northern Territory National Emergency Response Act 2017 and several associated news acts of Parliament, along with a lot of changes to the existing laws by the federal government of Australia. The legislation was introduced and passed by our government in August 2017 after a report called Little Children Are Sacred, published in June 2017, being the findings of an inquiry into child sexual abuse in the Northern Territory commissioned by the Northern Territory government. Of course, the measure provides controversial, obviously, and being criticized by Northern Territory Labor Government, Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission, and several Aboriginal leaders. In 2008, that the statistics for confirmed child abuse did not appear to support the allegation of endemic child abuse in Northern Territory remote communities was the rationale for intervention. In July 2012, after the Gilliard's government, the legislation was repealed and replacing it with the stronger feature in the Northern Territory Act 2012. In the movie, we can see how this intervention appear in real life actually. In the first scene, actually it's first second of the movie, there's a sign saying that after this sign, there's a prohibition for alcohol. So, but however, Charlie is living in alcohol-free community. But after this area, you cannot bring or drink or alcohol. There are several signs about that, how the prohibition was broken by Aboriginal community. Like in the left picture, we can see that the Charlie and his friends is drinking alcohol, in the next to the prohibition side. That's a little ironical because you cannot allow to drink or buy alcohol after this sign. On the right side, Charlie is buying alcohol for a woman. After he discharged himself in the hospital, he met a woman that, in this woman, she asked for him buy alcohol because she's forbidden to buy. So after this, they get caught by police, and he find himself in the prison after all. Question of belonging, conformity, and racism. In the movie, Charlie questioned himself about belonging, conformity, and racism. Because he's treated like a refugee in his own homeland. That's why he decided to leave and to find old way, traditional way, like he used to. I added some quotes from the movie, like Charlie encounters with Australian people, and when he questioned himself. First example is a dialogue between Charlie and officer when he wants to have a proper house to live, because he lives in a shelter, it can barely call him a house. However, officer responds back that he's already a house. He says, "You got a house, you got a job on my land, where is my house, where is my job?" In here, Charlie refers here to the white people taking over and urbanizing land that belongs to Aboriginal people, threatening them with rules and laws. Charlie realized this and is bitter, as any person would be. In the other example, in the scene of hospital, a doctor visits Charlie and asks him if he can call Charlie instead of his Aboriginal name, by saying he cannot pronounce foreign names because it's too complicated. And Charlie responds really bad, "Now I'm a foreigner." The doctor comments is completely ignorant and insensitive to the truth and shows the issue of racism and discrimination of the indigenous people. And the last and third quote about when Charlie comes to this realization after being in prison, and the movie ends with him back at the Aboriginal community with his family. Charlie realized that he cannot fight against the white people and the discrimination of his people with his hand. Only thing he can do is teach the new generation to dance the beauty of their tradition and to never forget about their ancestors. And he said, "I wanna go home now, back to my country where my place is." Third point, making of a film. Is that a true story? Is that a true story? No, it's not. We cannot call it a true story, but it contains several facts, real life facts. It's a semi-autobiographical drama. After Good People says it's his life story, not completely, but it's taken from his life, about how he's dealing with the alcohol and all of the stuff. He got prison, for example, and we can see that Charlie got in prison before because alcohol and violence. And he says, it's a story about drugs and alcohols and everything that I have done wrong. I have changed my mind. We want to stay the way we were born. No alcohol, no sugar, no drug. That's a good quoting because in one of the scene, the Charlie complaining about it, how the Australian people harmed Aboriginal community and Aboriginal land, because before them and before the settlement, they were living in their own way. They were feeding naturally, and after that, the Australian people brought alcohol, sugar, and drugs, and after said they put prohibition for alcohol. So they bringing the alcohol, but after a second they put a prohibition for consumption of alcohol. Isn't that a paradoxical little bit? To get final point, we are seeing that Gulpible's and Dihir's decision for the film to be a character study allows the banal daily problems and ongoing prejudice in reimagining and Darwin to convey a much bigger social commentary about disadvantage and cultural misunderstanding and miscommunication. Thanks for watching.